This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
Week 18 is always a complex one for talking player props in the NFL because not only are you considering the typical stuff like volume, efficiency, matchup, etc., but also you got to weigh incentives, you got to weigh motivation, you got to weigh all this stuff. Try to identify value in the prop market. We're trying to break that down for today by talking to Tom Vecchio, getting his read in the player prop market across week 18, at least where props are posted, and get you ready to hopefully get some profitable bets to round out the regular season. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research. Joined here, as mentioned, by Tom Vecchio. Find him on Twitter at Tom_Vecchio1. He is a writer for us over at FanDuel Research, of course, the host of Primetime Tom, along with the Daily ISO. Tom, happy Friday to you and happy final week of the regular season. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. Yes, certainly a really interesting week to break things down. There's also a little bit of weather on top of things, which also makes games that much more exciting. Like you said, a varying degree of motivation, incentives for a number of teams. Teams have motivation like the Vikings, but they also need a lot of help. Yep. So lots to break down.
Yeah, and then there's Eagles. Like if the Cowboys are winning at halftime to the Eagles pull starters, stuff like that. Like there's a lot of crazy stuff that could go on. There's, like you said, a snowstorm in Foxborough, which could be kind of cool. I have the under in that game, and it honestly makes me a bit nervous. With a 30.5, we get a lot of snow, and that could lead to some funky stuff, and I would like it to be as normal as possible. So I need the snow to chill out personally, so I can handicap that one more straight up. But
right, no. And that storm also could be impacting some of the other East Coast games on the way.
And
right.
Could it reach Connecticut or no?
Oh, it's going to.
Okay, so you're snowed in this weekend, is what you're saying?
Maybe.
Okay, that's my favorite kind of weekend is snowed in. I like if I know that I can go out, I feel guilty. Like, oh, I'm not doing stuff. I'm not, being active in those things. If I'm just stuck inside, it's so freeing. So I'm jealous.
And Saturday games as well. So.
Exactly. Get to watch. I'd stay and watch CJ Stroud. Terrible. Just a fate worse than death. We're going to talk about some key player props across week 18 and talk about whether all the key factors to consider here in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to the Covering the Spread podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. A lot of good stuff already in there right now. Tom has his breakdown of Colts versus Texans, talking CJ Stroud and company in that one. That's up on the Covering the Spread podcast feed along with FanDuel TV Plus already. Later tomorrow, we're going to have tomorrow morning breakdown of the Bills and Dolphins Sunday night game via Tom as well. So dedicated shows to the two key games for this week in your podcast feed. Our NFL Week 18 traditional betting preview with Dr. Feng is up, along with our national championship preview for Monday, talking Michigan versus Washington, all that stuff in the Covering the Spread podcast feed. So go subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or over on Spotify. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there is still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there are so many ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and more. So visit FanDuel and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Kentucky, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona, 1-888-789-7777, or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana, 1-800-522-4700. Visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas, 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghealth.org in Maryland, 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia, 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gambling helpline ma.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-HOPE-Y or text HOPE-Y in New York. Tom, let's begin things by talking about backups, because we're going to see some guys who are not traditional starters getting additional run this week, whether on teams eliminated or teams who are locked into their respective seats. Now, it's not a guarantee we get props posted for these guys, so it might not matter. But when we do get props up for some of these dudes, what process do you go through to evaluate expectations for those players, assuming, again, the props are eventually up for them?
Right. The overall rule, I would say, is that there's no one thing you can apply to every situation. They're all completely individual. And a lot of this, it kind of reminds me of almost as preseason, where some of it is coach speak, where we have to kind of sift through what we're hearing, what we're expecting. And then also I use, whether it's just like personal intuition of when I think of someone like Carson Wentz, set to start. We know that what the Rams plan to do. They said they're going to rest Stafford and Kupp and Kyren Williams and Higbee. Puka Nacua is not resting initially, but there could be some rest for him in the future.
Yep.
But for me, when I'm thinking like, okay, Carson Wentz, like he's probably going to go out there, and in my mind, I think he wants to sling it because he wants a starting job next year. So that has me interested in his prop. But just because he's a backup starting this week is not the same for another backup starting in a different team. So every situation is completely individual, completely unique. We have to use a little bit of coach speak, and then you kind of have to use a little educated guess of what you should be expecting from that team and that player ultimately.
I do think that Carson Wentz and Jeff Driscoll are identical. So both teams should be converted to pass catcher, or both players should be converted to pass catcher. If Carson Wentz were a tight end, maybe he sticks around the league a bit longer. So I personally think they're the exact same thing. So at least with those two specifically, you can go ahead and apply apples to apples. But I also think the key thing to remember is you don't have to bet any of this.
Right.
If you don't feel comfortable with your evaluation of a player or a situation, then just don't bet it. And again, sportsbooks might not do that either, because they might not post lines. Like I've been looking for Jeff Driscoll rushing lines all week and have found nothing so far. It's very frustrating. I would love to bet those, but we're not quite there yet. So weigh those situations, like Tom said, consider the key factors, look at what coaches are saying about that stuff, and blend that together and decide, is this worth betting? Do I think I have an edge? And then if you say yes to that, then take a look at the markets and see where things are at. Now, tied into that, Tom, is we had a lot of evolving situations for this week due to resting players. Everything is on the table here. So which evolving situations are most on your radar for checking out potential prop value, again, assuming we do eventually get markets posted for those respective situations?
One would be Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars, his health, what's going on with him, because they obviously need to win, and he didn't play last week. And it's also not just, okay, Trevor Lawrence is good to go. I'm just under the assumption that even if he does play, he's not like theoretically 100% healthy.
Right.
And that just doesn't impact them. It impacts the overall offensive efficiency and, more importantly, the props for the receivers. So I'm going to operate under the assumption as of now on Friday morning that he will play. He won't be 100%. It is a good matchup going up against Tennessee in their secondary, but it doesn't mean we're going to see amazing high volume passing. So at that point, I would look to, some players that have lower ADOTs if he's not going to be throwing the ball as deep, trying to get some modest reception totals, reception yards, rather than going to his passing yards directly. So I think that's number one. Number two, I would say Green Bay receivers. They haven't been healthy for how long? No. Christian Watson started the year with his hamstring issue, hasn't played in a couple of weeks, but they need to play and win. So looking at their receivers, who's going to be available, who's actually going to be out there, and then what do their yardage props look like? So those are probably two, at least initially, as of now.
And with the Packers one, like you said, there's no real like I always try to look at most relevant samples. There isn't one for that.
Right.
Like there was a time this year when they had Dobbs, Watson, and Reed all healthy, but that was before Reed really I think kind of came into his own. He was also dealing with some injuries during that time, and Watson's snaps were up and down and stuff like that. So I can't even look at that sample to decide what to expect for this game this week. It's just kind of I don't know. Like, there isn't a relevant sample on those guys. You're kind of using your best guess with regards to what their usages will look like.
Right. And I said the same thing about the Texans offense for Saturday's game, where Tank Dell gets hurt, and then Schultz misses some games, and Nico Collins missed a game, and then CJ Stroud also missed some time.
Right.
So it's like we're dealing with these sample sizes. It's like, yeah, theoretically, you want to look at the offense since Tank Dell got hurt, but even
and now Noah Brown's hurt too.
Right. And now, like, even since then, like, nothing lines up, where it's just like I could look at a 1-game sample size when Keenum was throwing the ball, but that doesn't really matter.
Right. I'm curious if they've had a game where they've had Laramie Tunsil at left tackle and all their pass catchers healthy this entire year, which is like something I'd love to look into for next year. Like, the Texans, if they get like better health luck, could go bananas. But like, there is no like great sample on those guys.
So the injuries, and again, like, Trevor Lawrence not being fully healthy isn't just about his props. It's also about the receivers' props.
Right. So and the problem there is, like, Christian Kirk could come off of IR this week. We'll know that Saturday by 4 p.m. Eastern. Like, they'd have to activate him by then. And based on the practice videos, I'm still skeptical that he gets activated personally. It didn't look like he was super spry out there. So I don't know. I'm still assuming he does not go, or I think there's a good chance he doesn't go, at least personally. With that one, we'll at least know by Saturday. So I would bet that if we get word from Shefty Bomb on Saturday night about Lawrence, we know what Kirk's situation is. I think we'll get props posted Saturday. But I think that you're right because last week was also kind of a must-win game for the Jags, and Lawrence couldn't play there. And that, to me, is a red flag as far as expecting to be healthy for this week.
I always I don't want to get like too tinfoil hatty, but it's like, am I thinking like, okay, they maybe they could sneak a win last week and just rest him, knowing that they could bring him back and still have one more shot? Is like, sometimes I think about that. I don't know if it's.
I mean, the opponent is pretty tough in the Panthers,
right?
Pretty tough team to try to topple there. Only a 26-0 victory to squeak out there. That was by the skin of their teeth for sure. Okay, let's take a look at some props that are posted, Tom. When you take a look at the markets of FanDuel Sportsbook, where are you seeing value as far as yardage bets for Week 18?
That starts with Dalton Schultz. I spoke about him yesterday. I think this is a pretty straightforward game for the Texans, and I said that I think we're going to see a modest amount of scoring in this game. It's not going to be like a Thursday night game that is super low. It's not going to fly over. It's going to have a modest amount of scoring. Schultz, I like his role. And again, we're dealing with different sample sizes where he missed some games. CJ Stroud was out, but good usage rate, 17.7 target share in the last 3 weeks, getting some red zone looks. He's playing on good snaps. It just lines up against the Colts and their defense, weak against tight ends. Should be, I'm going to say, the number 2 option in the passing offense behind Nico Collins with Tank Dell out. Keep things as simple as possible for the Texans this week.
And are you looking at the yardage number for Dalton Schultz or catches? Which market is the best
41.5, or it's up to 43. That's pretty close. I would say that's fine. I probably wouldn't go past that though.
Yeah. And I think that's fair too, given again, the Noah Brown injury. Right. He's been getting a lot of looks when he's been out there. Now you take him out of the equation. It's basically just Nico Collins and Dalton Schultz. Robert Woods hasn't been a huge factor in this offense since like week 2. So I think that like they got to go somewhere. I'd expect them to be effective. So like Schultz to me is a good player to turn to if you're looking for some value to take advantage of the Noah Brown injury.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So the number for Schultz, 43.5 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. I also hope you're right about the amount of scoring in this game because I had the under at 47.5. So modest is a great word to me. I think that we should lean into modest for this game.
Yeah, I think that game is going to start relatively slow. And I mentioned on Primetime Time yesterday, like I think we're going to see a slow start, and I actually have a lot of interest in a live over.
Sure.
I think it's going to be we're going to see like kind of like a scripted beginning as we see in some playoff games. Then the scoring picks up later is at least a trend I think I've noticed over the past few playoffs where a lot of lack of scoring and a lot of scoring in the second half. So that's where a live over would be really interesting.
Just don't pick up too much. That's my one request there. Okay. Which of the yardage bets are you eyeing for week 18?
Chris Olave, 70.5. And I know it's not the best matchup on paper, over 70.5 to be clear, to be specific. I know it's not the best matchup on paper, but the Saints have to win. And the best path to, or their best offensive player is Chris Olave. So when we're looking at the lack of health with Kamara, yeah, it's not a matchup I'd love to attack via the air with the Falcons. They're actually pretty solid. Olave is still the option they need to get the ball to. And I know he hasn't been fully healthy at times this year, but 70.5 for a player that has a super deep ADOT, high air yards, he could break this off in 2 or 3 catches and may not be a consistent option in the passing offense just because of the matchup, but he can get this done in I would say, again, 2, 3, 4 catches.
And I think that there are a couple of factors that could encourage the Saints to be a bit more pass heavy in this game. The first one, the Falcons are pretty good against the rush. Like from a matchup perspective, they're pretty good there. Kamara didn't practice again Thursday. And like season on the line, do you really want to be running Jamal Williams, Kendre Miller a lot as a way to like try to move the football against a good rush defense? But then also Kamara's one less target earner out there. So like, I think it kind of all leads not like to Olave, but also like, I think Rashid Shaheed alt markets are very interesting given the way that he's used his like downfield role. It's pretty conducive to getting chunk yardage in a hurry, which is the same thing you were saying with Olave. So I think both those do make a lot of sense. Checking out Olave in the traditional 170.5, but then Rashid Shaheed alt markets, just because I'd expect there to be a lot of passes and a potentially pretty concentrated target tree on those passes for the Saints.
Right. Like you said, it's if Kamara's there and not fully healthy, it's still not the best matchup. And just get the ball to your best players. Like they have to win, keep things as simple as possible. Like I would prefer teams that need to win and also have a great matchup. Right. But at least we have one of them. We have a team that needs to win. Yeah, it's not the best matchup on paper, but Olave still should be getting the ball.
Yep. And I think that should be a pretty fun game. Also indoors, which does help downfield receivers too for Olave. What about touchdown bets? Where are you seeing value there across week 18?
So I mentioned Green Bay. I like Romeo Doubs at plus 220. And yeah, you could say it depends on if Christian Watson is healthy. And there's, a few different permutations to what could or could not be happening for them. But again, we're dealing with, and maybe Doubs has just been the healthiest receiver. So maybe that's just why I like him. And he doesn't have the highest red zone usage rate in recent weeks, but they need to win. It's got a good number. And at least he's out there, which Christian Watson, I think, I'm not sure if you would agree, is maybe the most talented receiver in that group. Would you say? Or
I like Reed. I like Reed most, but I don't know. Watson, it confuddles me a bit, is what I would say. If that's not a down thing on Watson, it's more so I just think Jaden Reed rocks.
Okay. But when I'm looking at this game and we're looking at some of the odds for touchdowns, Christian Watson's number, the fact that he's coming off a hamstring injury, he could be pulled at any second, which always worries me for hamstring injuries. Reed's number is fine at plus 140 if he's out there, but Doubs, the fact that he's the healthiest and it's at plus 220 and they need to win is what makes it the most interesting for me.
I don't know why Doubs is so much longer than those guys, given that like his like heaviest usage area always feels like it's towards the end zone. Now, like his red zone usage for the year is 19%, which is not amazing by any means, but like it always feels like when he's getting targets, it's close to the goal line.
Right. So when I'm looking at this differential where I always look for these inefficiencies where like, even if a team's not scoring, where earlier in the year, I talked about Olave and he was like plus 175 for a touchdown and he's the highest usage. He's the highest red zone, all these things. Yeah, the Saints offense struggled at times, but he's still the number one receiver, and plus 175 or whatever it is too high of a number.
Right.
So I'm just looking at the Green Bay offense. Doubs at plus 220 is the standout option.
Right. My primary annoyance is that Jaden Reed, who gets some red zone rush attempts, is plus 140. I wish it were still longer. Those were great days back when they weren't totally hip to the way he was using the red zone. But alas, maybe next year we can get some people sleeping on Jaden Reed once again. Where else have you seen value as far as touchdowns go?
This might be a hot take. And we have a combination of two things. A team that absolutely needs to win with Tampa Bay. And B, we also have a milestone. And I don't like to get too deep into contract incentives and this and that, but Mike Evans is plus 100 for a touchdown. Do not like that number. However, Mike Evans needs 2 touchdowns to set the Bucs single season touchdown record. The Bucs also need to win. Now, Mike Evans breaking off 8 catches, 134 yards, and 2 touchdowns is something that we've seen from him for however many years. So at plus 800, Mike Evans for 2 touchdowns, I don't think is that far of a stretch, considering they need to win. And he also happens to have this little milestone, which I don't know if he knows about, I don't know if Baker knows about. all these things, but like it makes sense that they should be getting the ball to their best receiver.
Right.
So a very small sprinkle at plus 800 would be my hot take for the final week of the regular season.
I love that. I think that's very fun. Do you know what Mike Evans did against the Panthers first time they faced each other?
I would have to bring it up right now. I don't have it off the top of my head.
162 yards on, I think, 12 targets and 1 touchdown there. But clearly Baker was cooking in that game. Like you said, it's a high motivation spot for the Buccaneers, not as much so for the Panthers. JC Horn, I think, will play, but he also played in that first game about half the snaps. Is his first game off injury, but like he was active for that game. And it's also a Baker revenge game. Like how can we not consider that? What's Baker to score 2 touchdowns?
Well, Baker also has a ton of incentives.
Where is Baker? They don't even have odds on Baker to score twice. Suspicious. 8-1 to score any touchdown. So Baker 8-1 to score a touchdown, same odds as Evans to score 2. Maybe we get a triple dip there with Baker 1, Evans 2 for that one. But I think that, like, again, you're taking advantage of a volatile wide receiver and using his volatility to your advantage. And I think that is a fine way to look at things here.
So there are touchdown bets I have interest in, but none of them are posted yet for some of these games. And that's just a product of it being week 18. There's also a ton of injuries. For the Rams, like, I wouldn't hate taking a shot on a Wentz rushing touchdown.
Sure.
Well, if it gets posted, who knows, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
You know, Puka Nacua, the quote from McVay was like, he needs 4 catches and I think 29 yards.
Yeah, he does.
And then they're going to be smart with him or whatever it is for
first 4 plays is going to be Puka Nacua,
like,
Puka Nacua, Puka Nacua, Puka Nacua.
He's going to play 1 series or 2 series at most, and then he's out. So, like I said at the beginning, I think Wentz is going to try and sling it because he wants to put some good tape out there because he wants a starting job next year. Wentz, like, going all out, diving for the pylon for a touchdown wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I think that is a fun way to look at things. And right now, no numbers posted there. Things to consider for that one. Total's not super high, 41.5, and the Rams are 4-point dogs. So make sure you're weighing that when you see the Wentz number to decide, okay, it's going to be probably not a huge point output for the Rams. So keep that in consideration for them. But check out Wentz when he is posted to see if you think there is value there. Any other bets you're seeing, Tom, as far as potentially values for Week 18?
Yeah, one more in that Saturday game. Colts, Texans. Michael Pittman, over 6.5 receptions. It's minus 138. I don't mind that at all. I don't mind some Michael Pittman alternate receptions. Looking back at his game log this year, he is routinely piling up 9, 10, 12, 14 targets in some of these games. Then when we look at the Texans defense, they're solid against the run, right? They're solid against the run. And moving the ball via Jonathan Taylor may not be effective. It's probably not the best path to them winning in a must-win game. So why not go to your best offensive option? And as I discussed on the pod yesterday, Houston brings good pressure. So if Minshew's not going to be dropping back or not having time to drop back, Pittman has a 7.9 ADOT. So he's going to be that consistent option as he's been all season, piling up 10, 12 targets. And all of a sudden he has 8 receptions. They may not be massive yards per reception just because, his ADOT's not super high and the pressure is going to be there. But these constant passes to him, he could have 8 receptions by halftime.
Right. And you mentioned the pass rush. Will Anderson didn't practice Tuesday or Wednesday, but did get a limited session in Thursday. I think he'll go because he played last week. So I think he'll be out there to kind of keep that pressure cooking on a Colts offensive line that's played really well this year. So to their credit, they could definitely hold up against a good pass rush, but definitely worth considering with Pittman. The 6.5 number you mentioned, minus 138 on the over. Checking out some alternate receptions for Pittman. To get 8+ is plus 128, 9+ is 2-1, and 10+ is plus 310. Preferred market for you, Tom, there, having seen the alt markets now, do you want to stick with the 7+ or over 6.5, or what do you think is the best route to attack Pittman for receptions?
It's probably over 6.5 is my main play, but
yeah,
just taking a sprinkle at 8+ at plus 128, I think is also viable.
Okay, so check out Michael Pittman, check out the alt markets for that game, and again, check out what Tom had to say about the game in full by checking out Primetime Tom in the Primetime Tom in the Covering the Spread podcast feed, and along with his breakdown of Bills Dolphins, which will be up tomorrow morning as well. That is Tom Vecchio. Make sure you check him out on Twitter at Tom_Vecchio1. Check out Primetime Tom right here on the Covering the Spread podcast feed, but also the Daily ISO if you want to play some NBA DFS on the numberFire Daily Fantasy podcast feed. Tom, appreciate the time as always. Good luck to you this weekend. We'll talk to you once again soon.
Thanks for having me.
All right. You can find Tom again on Twitter at Tom_Vecchio1. I am on Twitter at Jim Sonis. You can find me on Threads at Jim.Sonis. And you can find FanDuel Research on Twitter at FanDuel Research. Again, don't forget our Week 18 preview is up and our College Football National Championship preview up as well. Back with you once again Monday to take our first look at the wild card round betting markets. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.